This video is a memory story to help you remember the model essay for Discuss Cultural Influences on Gender Role for the PSYA3 topic of gender. I have made another video which is the revision video which contains the whole model essay, so I'll put a link to that in the description. But this video is how to remember. I've created a story so that you can remember every single paragraph that you need to. If you would like a copy of the PowerPoint that accompanies this video, which has the full model essay within it, then just tweet me at blonde_pretzel and request one. If the culture question comes up, I want you to think culture and immediately imagine Marilyn Monroe feeding a baby. Now, Marilyn Monroe was a universal superstar and she didn't have any babies of her own, and yet imagine her feeding a baby, and that's to represent that Monroe said that division of labour is universal. So Marilyn Monroe is a universal star, she's feeding a baby, and that division of labour is universal. And then imagine that the baby's dad comes into the room and pinches Marilyn Monroe on the bottom, and she's really angry, turns around and slaps him across the face. And that's to represent that Mead said that aggression is innate, but it's culturally relative. So when you remember Marilyn Monroe slapping the dad around the face, you're thinking, why is she slapping him? Oh, she's being aggressive. And Mead said that aggression is culturally relative. So imagine Marilyn Monroe is walking down the street and she is stereotypically absolutely beautiful for her generation. And Williams says to Best, wow, Marilyn Monroe is the best. So Williams and Best's sex stereotypes, Marilyn Monroe is stereotypically beautiful. She's walking down the street, everybody's looking at her, and Williams says, wow, Marilyn Monroe is the best. So that should remind you of that. So then imagine that for some reason Marilyn Monroe decides to go and find out how the other half live, and she hops on a bus and goes to visit the Amish community in the middle of nowhere. And when she gets there, she finds one of the Amish women making a berry pie. So when you think about berry pie, it's Berry et al. Who said that conformity is universal, women are more conformist, but again, it's culturally relative. Women in close-knit sedentary societies like the Amish, the women are more conformist, probably because they have to be. They're relying on their men to provide the resources. So Marilyn Monroe goes to visit the Amish and makes a berry pie. Now we move on to the AO2. Marilyn Monroe is looking out the window. She's making a berry pie with her Amish friend, looking out the window and sees a great big American eagle swooping down into the woods. And she can see the Amish men in the woods who are all like really strong and flexing their muscles, and one of them puts his arm out and the big American eagle swoops down onto his arm. So we're looking at Eagly and Woods. The American eagle swoops into the woods, and Eagly and Woods had an alternative explanation for that division of labour. They didn't say that it was universal because of biological reasons. They thought it was biosocial reasons. So the men are really strong and the women have the babies, and that causes social differences, which causes psychological differences. And so they think that the division of labour is a biosocial reason. So Marilyn Monroe is looking out at all these men, and they're really strong and stuff in the woods, and she thinks, oh, maybe I can go on a date with one of them. But when she looks around at all of them, she doesn't find any of them attractive, and she thinks, I think I'll get out of here. And one of the Amish women decides to go with her, and they go and stand at the bus stop. So this is to represent that Eagly and Woods reanalyzed Bus's data, and if you remember from relationships, Bus said that there are innate preferences for a marriage partner between men and women. Men go for youth and fertility, and women go for tall and rich men who provide resources. But Eagly and Woods, think about Marilyn Monroe, didn't find any of them attractive. That's because Eagly and Woods found that when women have more power and more status, like Marilyn Monroe, then they don't go for your stereotypical marriage preference guy. They can go for whoever they want. So the bus is culturally driven to do with marriage preferences. So Marilyn Monroe and the Amish woman, let's call her Beryl, they hop on the bus, and as they're driving away, they're like cackling their heads off laughing, and think, why are they laughing? And it's because they've left all the dads at home looking after the babies, and Beryl finds that hilarious because she's always doing all the graft with the babies. So that's to represent that Cohn in 2014 said that found that Monroe, their they lacked temporal validity because now the amount of stay-at-home dads has quadrupled. So we can see perhaps that it's not, the division of labour isn't necessarily universal because of biological reasons, that there could be cultural influences in there too. So they're on this bus and they go past a field, and there's loads and loads of women in the field working, farming in the fields. And imagine them to be cartoon characters like Little Miss Farmer. And that's because Hargreaves did the study, and Roger Hargreaves created the Mr. Men, Little Miss. So Little Miss Farmers are all in the fields doing all the agricultural work. And so that's to show that Hargreaves said sometimes there's an unusual division of labour in some cultures the women are the farmers, and in that instance that they will have a higher status. So that leads us to our next point. So they've gone past the field with the Little Miss Farmers, and Marilyn Monroe and Beryl arrive at a town. They get off, go into the pub, and then all the Little Miss Farmers who've been in the fields are now in the pub drinking pints, having a rip-roaring time, doing shots. And that's to represent that when women are involved in food accumulation, like the Little Miss Farmers, they are less conformist. So drinking pints and doing shots is not a traditionally conformist thing for women to do. You may disagree, but this is what the psychology is saying. And so they're in the pub, they're not being conformist, and that's because they've got a higher status in societies, and because they're involved in food accumulation, they don't need to conform to those higher members. So they're all having a rip-roaring time in the pub, but suddenly it all kicks off in the corner, and there's a massive bar brawl between Mead and Freeman. They're having a massive bust-up, and that's to represent that Freeman trashed Mead's research. So imagine them fighting, but Freeman didn't get away lightly because Mead crashes a stool over his head, and that's to show that he wasn't necessarily the victor because he was also criticised. Marilyn Monroe and Beryl watch as Mead and Freeman take it outside, and they think, oh, we're starving, let's order something to eat. But when they look at the menu, it's all in Chinese and they can't understand any of it. So that's to represent the fact that the research to do with gender is often culturally biased. So we call it an imposed ethic when you try and enforce a questionnaire that maybe Williams and Best made in one culture and enforce it onto another culture. You're imposing it. So when you think about Marilyn Monroe and Beryl trying to read the menu and it's Chinese, you're thinking, why is that? They can't understand it. It's because it represents an imposed ethic in research. And finally, your final point, you think, well, Marilyn Monroe and Beryl are determined to get something to eat. So they go up to the bartender and say, can we have some cheesy chips, please, and maybe a side order of onion rings? So they were absolutely determined to get fed. And that's for you to remember that the cultural approach is a deterministic one. It's taking away that idea of free will. If you're born in one culture, you will be a stay-at-home mum, or you will have division of labour, when actually what we've really found is that gender role is an interaction of cultural and biological factors. So that's your revision story to help you remember all the different sections. Don't just rely on that though, because you will have to write out the whole essay as well. If you're my students, you've got a timed essay on this on Friday the 27th of May 2016, and so yeah, get revising. Good luck.